essentially, a lot of people have been making some reacts to this. I saw DM lately, a couple of others, and I've been told to watch this. Check it out. It's a 12-minute video. I think that before we watch this, I feel like there's a lot of bad things about PoE 2 right now that needs to be fixed. There's a larger amount of good things in PoE 2, in my opinion. But I was told to watch this video. I have no idea what it is other than Paul Tassi and a bunch of people made some reacts to it. So apparently it's worth watching. So we're going to give it a watch and make our own little take on it. Here's the video, by the way.
Alright, I am back with a new Path of Exile 2 video, which may end up being my last one for a while, which is unfortunate. I don't really want to make this video. I know it will probably get me yelled at a certain amount by existing fans, calling me a tourist or whatever. I'm a new player. I'm a new player to Path of...
Has the expression tourist become popular or what? That's hilarious. I've always referred to content creators that are variety streamers that comes and goes into the next big hype to be tourist streamers because they're only there for the hype, and then the next hype they move on. I didn't know that was that popular. I prefer filthy cash. Oh my god.
of Exile, so I can only give my take, but this is based on an article I wrote today about Path of Exile 2's endgame. And that was sort of a reaction to my own experience, and then a video I watched from Kriparian, who is a great YouTuber. I watched so much of his stuff during Diablo, and he's great. And he really articulates the issues that I'm having and made me feel like I'm not really alone. And the end result is like, I got to stop playing this for the time being. Where I am currently at in the game, it does not seem like there's a reasonable path forward to continue. Again, this is early access. I will fully acknowledge that, and clearly it is an early access for a reason, because this end game is not it for, I would say, the vast majority of players. I also think I have probably played more than a lot of, quote unquote average players. Not as much as, the 14, 15 hour a day grinding streamer guys, but probably more than a lot of people who have just been kind of, playing the early access when they have a free moment or two. This is my job, so I have had a lot more time. I've gone through the campaign 2 times, once on normal, once on cruel difficulty, which is ironic because cruel is much easier because your build is really ramped up by that point, where at lower level...
But that's a common thing in PoE 1 as well. Like the hardest part of the campaign is the first couple of acts. Then you get your build online, and after that you ramp through. It's hard for the game to make those challenging because your build is now finalized, if you will.
Levels, it can be really challenging. Crip talks about how Act 2 was like the hardest the game was for him, because you can be so underpowered at that point, especially melee, that you can't really do anything about it, because you can't really farm up in a traditional sense in an act, because that's just not really how it's structured. So you are a little bit stuck until you figure out some of these fights. It was challenging. It was definitely, there were challenging aspects to it, especially in normal, and I'm okay with that. I do not need to be a Diablo 4 steamroller of just, blowing up entire screens of guys and, just not really feeling any challenge even at kind of the hardest difficulties. It's fun, certainly, but I appreciated Path of Exile's more kind of methodical pace, the bosses, which, maybe not fully Dark Souls, but that kind of idea where you learn their attack patterns, trial and error.
I don't like the reference to Dark Souls things because, like, I've never played the Souls-like games till I played the Dark Souls a few days and finished Millennia, whatever her name is, before the DLC. I loved it. The game's fantastic, and I would never ever combine or try to compare PoE 2 with Elden Ring. It is night and day difference. I really can't do it. It's like I don't understand the whole pressure onto doing that personally. I really don't get it. But that's like, well, I guess I can see it, but I don't know if I agree with it at
All this stuff. So by the end, I was cruising. I think I beat all of the act bosses in anywhere from 1 to 3 tries with my ranger build, and I was excited to get to the end game because there's a ghost, Evie. She came. I felt my build was like, okay, I'm gonna keep powering it up. I'm gonna keep leveling up, and this end game looks really interesting. It's like this big map. You got all these different nodes. You plug in waystones for like different levels of challenge and things, and that sounded pretty cool to me. It seemed like a really interesting setup. There's a whole new skill tree for it, and I'm like, all right, let's take it on. This is nothing like the game that came before it.
True.
The main issues here are that all of these dungeons are now, or these maps are now one death over. You have one life, and if you die for any reason, you're out of the map. And not only you're out of the map, you can also no longer go back to that same map because it eats your waypoint token. So you have to go grind out a new waypoint token, usually on a lower level, depending on how many of these you have, and then get back up to that tier, and then hope you don't die again. What one death per level, especially at like the base levels of these.
This might be a hot take, but I don't mind the one death maps. I actually don't mind it. They made it so you can go back into the map with a new token, but you lose all the possible scaling modifiers that the map had. I like it because you have to play a bit more. Like someone in chat wrote it pretty well, saying that you have to play responsibly. I like that. What I don't like is that that's the case for endgame citadel bosses and stuff like that. The pinnacle fights that has like one shot mechanics, stuff like that. I think it's a little too punishing on those situations personally. But I think the mapping experience, it makes sense. It's not mindless brain dead grinding. You have to actually think about what you're doing. And you don't lose all of it. You lose your tokens. We can still do the map to progress through the atlas to continue progressing. But I do think it's a bit too punishing on like endgame pinnacle bosses and citadels, because like if you get randomly one shot there or whatever happens, you might not be ready for it. You don't get to try again. You don't get to practice. You have to literally go find another citadel. And for players like myself who have been playing literally non-stop for the past 2 weeks with the subathon, with very limited sleep, hence my sleep depraved face. I think that like I would be fine with it, but I think most people would find that too punishing. I do like the mapping part of it.
Seems overly punishing. That is certainly not how the normal game worked in any capacity. Dying was like not the greatest because it would set you pretty far back on the map, and not only would you have to trek all the way back, but they would respawn all the enemies. It wasn't, it was kind of annoying, but it was fine. And then all the bosses, they were hard, but they would at least spawn you right outside again. You had a lot of boss fights or trial and error, learning their moves, figuring out how to beat them. And unless you were just so powerful, you would tank a boss, one shot a boss, whatever, really easily. They're certainly all about trial and error. The young game is not like this all. And the problem with the one death thing is, okay, maybe I could, that's a challenge and it's not ideal, but you just play really, really carefully. Yes, but that only works to a point. And, you will find at certain points in the game, kind of no matter what your build is, depending on where you are in the game, that it is possible to get one shot. And then the further you go, it almost becomes more possible because of enemy damage scaling. And that's certainly true on a ranger, which relies on kind of dice roll evasion to get around stuff. And obviously on melee, you're getting hit a lot more. So not only are you losing a map, but like any rogue hit from any big enemy can theoretically kill you. And I'm like, okay, well this isn't great, and I don't really love how this is going, but is this just the beginning? Like, am I just not strong enough to?
I mean, these are fair takes so far. I see what chat's saying, but like these are fair takes. I think this is fair so far.
Be taking this on, even if I am kind of at the lower ranks, and like, yeah, I was beating some of the lower maps and stuff, but then you'd take a one hit and then lose your stone, and now I'm out of stones and trying to figure out what to do. And then I watched the crypt video, and the crypt video kind of laid everything out. It is the video that just straight up made me like, yeah, I'm out. Okay, like this is not something I want to play. The issue there is like, the long and short is it doesn't get any better from here. It gets worse. And what Crip explains is that the further you get into this, the deaths get more and more punishing. So everything is, one death, you're out of the map. But you get further in, you start losing XP, and Lord knows how hard it is to, gain XP at higher levels already. So you'll lose some percentage.
I don't agree that it gets worse. The XP part, yes. There's a reason no one's hit level 100 yet. Let me see the ladder. This is because you basically get no experience after 98 until you do tier 16 plus 2 maps. So that's kind of crazy in my opinion that no one's hit 100 yet. That is punishing as fuck. Like, I definitely see that. But I feel like the game is so early. And okay, it's early access, but look past that. We have not figured out the metas yet. We have not figured out what's best to be used right now. And if you look at the Infernalist, the one I've spent most time playing, I can make the build unkillable. Like, I can't die. I literally cannot die. And there are many of those builds. There are builds that just ramps through everything. That is right now. We didn't have that when we started off. Like, we didn't know what we were doing right.
Of your XP if you die, you will not only lose your higher tier waystone, but in some of these places you will lose all of the connecting points to like where you just got to. So you'll have to replay those maps to get all the way back up to what you need. And in those lower maps, according to him, like you're not farming anything remotely at all that you need. So you could do that for an hour, get all the way there, die again, go back. You've lost XP. So like you can actually be behind where you started at that tier. And like as annoying as it is to have to start a map over and lose your waystone, that sounds infinitely more annoying the higher you get. The second,
I do want to point out this. Like, I don't think that the whole losing a map is a problem at all. Like, I play the end game a lot. These are my tier 15s that I have right now. That might sound like a lot. No, that might not seem like a lot. But here's my dump tab of maps because I couldn't fit them since the map stash is not in the game. This is stash number 1. Here's stash number 2. Here's stash number 3. Vast majority of these maps are 14 plus. Like, me losing a map, couldn't care less. I have so many.
second thing he verifies is that this one-shotting thing is not going to stop. Like, not really in any build. He's talking about how, like, you have to build for, like, 3,000 HP, like, all the armor you can, max resistance, all of the stuff. And even then, you can still get one-shot or at least killed in very cheap ways. And he talks about
Like, again, I think that has a lot to do with the build design as well. I made a video about this rather recently, talking about defensive layers, how important it is to look into those things. Some builds will handle tier 16 maps smoother on lower budgets than others. For example, I had a better experience doing the Titan Summoner on tier 16s in a life block style than an Infernalist doing it in the same sense. But if I went on and played with my hybrid or CI approach, I'm basically unkillable. Currently, I'm playing a Doriani. The only thing that has a high risk of killing me is lightning damage, and only lightning damage from sources that are well telegraphed for me to dodge. If I die on that build right now, it's because I made a mistake. And I like that, because I actually have to play responsibly. I don't have this situation. What he's talking about, that experience I had before we figured these things out. And that's just about the build not being able to capable of handling it. You have to play in a certain way depending on the build you're playing. I don't agree with that take at all. He has some good takes, but some of this, I feel like it. I don't want to use the word skill issue, but it's the game is so early, we haven't figured things out yet. Some parts we're getting there. We're getting there quite rapidly as well. There's plenty of fantastic content creators out there, and we're figuring shit out. And now it's like there's so many builds you can do that's literally unkillable, even in tier 16 plus 2 maps. Like, you cannot die.
Floor effects that you can barely even see that kill you, or enemy attacks that are not telegraphed, or elite modifiers that you have to like fully understand as they're running towards you that you can't avoid, because there are no movement skills in this game. And he talks about how the entire game essentially is based around dodge rolls and not screwing up dodge rolls, because if you are in a situation where you can get one hit, the only way you can always avoid that theoretically is hitting every dodge roll perfectly. And obviously I know there are like these highest tier guys who are like have the best builds in the world and are like crazy APM dodge roll folks, but like, Crip is a top tier player, and if he's saying this, and I've seen other top players saying this too, like, what hope do any of us have? And it's enough to just sort of make me stop playing. I don't see a reason to keep going here if it's not really even about getting stronger. If it's not like I just am, not skilled enough or whatever, because I don't hit every single dodge roll in every single map. Like, that to me is nothing like what I've played so far. And I feel like I've heard some people pushing back on this. Asmongold made a video about Crip's video. Of course, I guess I'm doing that here, but I'm not playing Crip's video. where he's like, oh, like it's not that hard. Like he's complaining too much, and like both Asmongold switched off of a warrior because it was too hard and switched to something else. And also, like a lot of the people complaining are not in.
I had the most tankiest and smoothest experience in tier 16 on a super low budget, casual friendly approach on a summoner with the warrior than I did on the infernalist. And we talk a solo self on trash gear. It was smooth. It was fine to play, and it's like that was without going crazy with gear or anything. But if I did the same approach and I did that on the infernalist, I was experiencing what the, both Crip was experiencing as well as the Paul Tassi here is experiencing as well. The one shot, it was frustrating. I don't mind it in the mapping stages because it's about you fixing your gear, fixing your build to make sure that doesn't happen, and then you can ramp up your build's efficiency with by upgrading your character, your gear, and whatnot to be able to handle that and do more damage, if you will. It's a progression, and I think that's really good personally. And then but if you look at it on lower budget states, soul self on not having a bunch of currency invested into your character, some builds will do better than others. That's just Path of Exile. But I do agree with the take when it comes to pinnacle bosses. Like the system in maps, if you fail a map, you can go back into the map with a new token. That's fine. You can do that. They don't allow you to do this on Citadels, which I think they should. I think that pinnacle bosses like the Arbiter is a little too punishing to only have one try on because there's a lot of one-shot mechanics in there, and they are very fast. The fight's actually really hard, which I do like, however. But I think it's a little too punishing. But for Citadels, all they have to do is just let the player go in again. But it's just not going to have all the modifiers, all the league mechanics. They disappear. They let us do this on map systems. They should have that in Citadels as well. That's the part I agree with. But generic mapping, when you just progress the Atlas outside of the Citadel bosses, it's just fix the build. And we haven't figured that out. A lot of people, we have figured out a lot now, but we're still miles behind. It has more to do with figuring out the builds so you play an effective build. You can do fine up until tier 5 maps, and then you start getting one-shot if the build's bad.
In the end game, they might be on cruel difficulty or something like, well, I'm on cruel difficulty and this game isn't hard at all. It's like, yeah, that's true. Cruel difficulty was not very hard. But you get into the end game, you play an hour of that and figure out like how this is going and how this is going to work. I think you will probably end up being where I'm at. And
I disagree. An hour in on mapping, I had the time of my life. I'll say this. I know a lot of people like doing the same map over and over again, like we do in PoE 1. I love the Atlas. The progression journey that promotes. I didn't get annoyed with one-shots and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, I got to fix my build. That was my take. That was many, many hours into the end game. Many hours into the end game. I'm not sure how someone can play. Like I will criticize Paul Tassi on this. How do you play the end game for 1 hour and get annoyed with that? If you're dying on that low tier maps for that problem, then it is guaranteed a build issue. Not skill, build issue. It's literally a build issue. That's how I feel. I wasn't rest capped because they had horrible loot drops till they fixed it not long ago. And I was not rest capped till I was in tier 8 or tier 9 maps. That's when I got my rest capped. And I barely died before that. And then we figured out that I had a lot of other things I had to change with that build to make it actually survive. But I still didn't have that problem until tier 8, tier 9. It was crazy.
The thing is like, I don't want to abandon this game. Like, I really enjoy Path of Exile. I had a great time with the 50 whatever hours I put in it to beat both stages of the campaign. I'm just so disappointed that the end result of this is essentially like a non-functional end game where it doesn't seem remotely worth trying to play it, especially solo. I would love for stuff to be overhauled to the point where it actually feels rewarding for, the pretty decent, if I'm steamrolling everything on Cruel, I'd at least like to, participate in the end game in a more meaningful extent than like, just the base lower tier ones. And even those, if you step the wrong way, you can lose. And there's nothing.
Okay, so early tier maps, dying a lot. This is like talking to someone in like Ancient Bracket or Divine Bracket in Dota. And they're saying, oh, I'm a much better player. I should be immortal. And then, you ask them, yeah, well, why aren't you? And they say, oh, it's my teams. It's the ELO fucking terrorists screwing over my games. I'm losing because of my teammates. Now, I used to play professionally in Dota 2 before I started streaming. And I can tell you right now, that game, the number one thing you hear about people is projection. They will blame everything but themselves when they die, when they fail. It's just, oh, it's ELO terrorists that's fucking me over. That's it. They don't look at their own gameplay, fix their own shit so they can get better. Path of Exile is not Diablo game. It's not a very new player friendly in that sense. You have to actually look at your gameplay. You have to look at the character you've built and make changes. My reaction when I started dying when I was in tier 8, 9 after I got my rest capped, my reaction wasn't, oh, the game's overpowered, the game's too hard. I had some complaints about, which was the on-death effects of certain mechanics, especially the chaos damage, which they fixed actually, that I had some complaints about. But most of the takes I had was, how do I fix this on my character? What can I change on my skill tree and my gear to prevent these things from happening? And then, a couple of hours later, we then had a build that was farming tier 16s. Now, I understand that new players might not be able to figure those things out that don't have an extensive experience in Path of Exile. And if you don't, you can always follow a build guide. But if the problem is that you're dying that much, the first initial reaction shouldn't be to blame the game. The first initial reaction should be, what can I do to improve my character's defenses to sort this? That's how I see it. Because this feels like listening to someone who's just projecting that, oh, I'm dying, the game should not make it so that I can play the way whatever I want, however I want, without making me die. Diablo provides that. Path of Exile does not. I agree that some things were a bit overtuned. They were. I agree with that. But that didn't happen until you were like tier 5, 6, 7, 8. That's when those problems started emerging. If you even had a half decent build in terms of defensive layers. That's how I feel about it. And that might sound harsh to say, but that's how I see it. I feel like this is projection.
You can really do about your build to fully change that according to, other people. I can imagine maybe this will be fixed and overhauled over time. I looked at what they're changing in the end game, and it was just like, we're adding more rare packs so you can finish maps faster or something like that. And like, they didn't address anything about difficulty or whatever. And like, to be clear, I'm not anti-difficulty. There were very, very challenging.
Before he finishes the sentence, I will say this. Path of Exile have a track record history of making sure shit is already too hard on launch because it's easier to nerf it than it is to make something harder. And the reason for this is they have X content that might be a little overtuned. They bring that down. It's approved. It's appreciated by the community. If something's too easy and they say, no, we're going to make it harder, people hate that. And it's only negative reactions to it. That's why game companies that know what they're doing makes things harder than they expect so they can tone it down so it's balanced rather than the opposite, because the opposite will be spread with criticism.
Challenging parts in this game, in the early campaign, especially when you don't have the build, that a lot of trial and error, really, kind of frustrating stuff, but you overcome, you change your strategies, whatever. But
yes.
Within the campaign,
why didn't you?
If I died to a boss and it kept sending me back to the previous map every single death, I would be like, screw this, I'm out of here. But that's essentially what the end game is. I don't know how much it'll change. It like the one death map thing seems kind of baked into the mode. So maybe at best they nerf enemy damage to be more reasonable, so you're just not always getting one shot. One thing that actually does scale pretty well is enemy health. Like, my build was actually doing still really good damage to these higher level enemies. I thought that was a really good aspect of it. But if you're just going to be one shot with every attack you can't dodge roll out of, or like fighting a boss where you don't know the mechanics and the first attack kills you, like what are you supposed to do about that? And the analogy I like that I put in my article is like, it's like an Elden Ring, a very challenging game that people love and like overcoming the challenge. If you fought Millennia for the first time and died and...
Again, with the Elden Ring references, when was this recorded? 4 days ago. This is... Chat, can you confirm that this is before the on-death nerfs on damage, the chaos damage? I think I saw Oshkaka wrote it. So this is before those things. I agree those were overtuned, absolutely. It was kind of hard to work around them. I agree, 100%. Those things he's 100% on point with. Those things didn't start turning into an actual problem until tier 5, tier 6, tier 7. He's talking about dying to these things and other things in tier 1, 2, 3 maps. So my take's still, they're still valid.
And it reset, it took all of your runes and it erased all sites of grace on that part of the map. Like that is the equivalent of this here, where I think it's great that games can be challenging, but if they just put in things that are irritating and exhausting and progress erasing for its own sake, like, no, I'm not going to deal with that. And that's a literal waste of my time if I can play a significant amount of a game and essentially get nothing for it. Like at least right now I'm getting some XP, but if I start losing XP, what am I doing at all at that point? So that's why I'm done for now. I would love to come back to this. It's early access. You know, they're going to make big changes to this and that. And there's more campaign to add. I'd love to play more campaign because that was definitely the most fun I had. But I'm curious how everyone else feels about the end game. If you're running into some of the same issues I have, if you are there, or if you're not there yet, check back when you are, and you can see if you agree with me here. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Right. Let me link the video to you guys. There it is. This is the video I've been watching. Shout out to Paul Tassi for it. We're definitely going to be posting this on our YouTube channel. This was posted before the changes. Question. Did he come back to play the game after
don't like it.
the
It's
changes?
Shit.
Did he come back afterwards? Oh, Jesus. There's a lot of text. Do we know? Yes, and he enjoyed the update. There you go. I think that one of the main problems that is voiced here, that is very clear to anyone watching this video or his video, is that it's not about skill issue. It really isn't. And it's not about being bad at gaming. No, because you have to keep in mind that the vast majority of player base that is playing games in general are casual players. And that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We don't have to have only the veterans and the sweatiest of sweats being able to play a game and enjoy it. It shouldn't be that way. And I think PoE 2 is doing a really good job in getting to that point. They still have some things that is overtuned. Absolutely. The problem I have is that there's this, not just in game reviewers or in ARPGs, it's a problem in gaming in general, where when shit gets too hard, instead of trying to solve the problem and fix it and improve themselves as an actual gamer, the first take they do is blame the game. Oh, I didn't get showered with currency. The game's fault. Oh, my character's dying. Game's fault. Oh, I died. I have 5 HP and no negative resistances, and I get one shot in maps. Yeah, the game should fix this for me. Like, that's how I feel. Is that this whole projection is a humongous problem in gaming in general. You see this when you play ranked games a lot. And like I said before, I played Dota 2, and Dota 1 for that matter as well, a lot. And the one thing you notice with people that could be fantastic, could be the next fucking Thompson in the game, and next, like, you basically see these fantastic players, and then they get stopped in their progression as a gamer because instead of looking inwards, that they blame and just project all their issues. Oh, I'm losing because of this. I'm dying because of this. It's the game's fault. It's my teammates' fault. Path of Exile is not a very friendly game for casual players. It is a fantastic game, but it still forces players to look into their builds and be like, okay, well, I'm dying. How do I solve that? There's some food for thought. Keep that in mind. Anyways, I'll leave a link in the description to Paul Tass's video. Hit the like button, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment down below what you guys think of his take. I think that some of it is pretty fair, and I think some of it is projection. But anyways, you watched this far, so I guess you heard all my takes. But catch you guys in the next one. Till then, stay safe. Keep rocking.